Hello and good morning, afternoon, and evening, depending on where you are. So now it is time for the fourth session of these webinars in the International Week of Happiness at Work. My name is Héðinn Sveinbjörnsson, and as you know, I come from Iceland, and my name is a little bit difficult for many of you, so you can call me Hedin. Let's have a reminder why the International Week of Happiness at Work is in the world. So it's all started in Holland in 2018. Two ladies who are very into happiness at work, listening and stuff. They decided that we needed to focus on work culture on because as we know, we spend a lot of our time at work. So, and work can have a significant impact on the rest of our lives as our own upbringing and stuff. So now it is time to bring on the guests. So my guest now in this fourth session is a storyteller, a communication coach. She's an author and professional musician. So I wondered if I had stumbled upon a famous person. No, she's only known in the Great Montana area.
Pretty much.
So Sarah Elkins, welcome. So
Thank you.
thank you very much for being with me. And we are the topic today. Your stories don't define you, how you tell them will. So from one storyteller to another, because we Icelandic people, we read a lot, or we did, and but we believe in elves, the trolls, the mountains, and the ghosts, and the life afterlife, and whatever. So I don't know if we are going there, but you have some interesting stuff. So, but let us know a little. Tell us a little bit about why are you a storyteller and professional musician. Why aren't you world famous? You look like a rock star.
Well, I feel like a rock star some days.
Of course.
Well, it's funny. I've always loved storytellers, live storytellers. I am Jewish, and a lot of Jewish people are storytellers. It's kind of a cultural thing, kind of like the Icelandic people. And I remember growing up with people who shared these amazing stories of where they grew up and things that happened to them in their lives. But I never considered myself a storyteller until I started blogging about customer service and customer experience, because that's generally where I've found most of my career has fallen. No matter where I sat, I provided customer service and trained others to provide exceptional customer experiences. And so I started doing these trainings internally for companies I worked for, and then started doing them as a side hustle with other organizations. And I started writing this blog about how to give and receive good customer service. And the point being, if you want good customer service, it's a good idea to be a good customer in the first place. And what I found is that by sharing specific stories about my experiences as an agent of customer service and also receiving customer service, that I could tell both sides of how things were happening. And people received that much more easily and effectively than me telling them what to do in terms of do this for good customer service or do that for good customer service. Never do ABC. By telling the stories, people received it better. And then they could see themselves in the customer experience. So if I was training somebody to give good customer service, I would start with, tell me about the best customer service you ever had. And then I would share my own experience and they would share theirs. And then this random person that ended up becoming a friend reached out to me on LinkedIn and said that she was helping plan the International Tour Management Institute's annual symposium. ITMI was a company in the Bay Area, and they were planning their annual event. And she invited me to submit a proposal to be their storyteller that year. And I didn't really know what to say because I had never done anything quite like that. So I just said yes, and thinking, well, I'll figure it out as I go, which I did. And I had so much fun with it. And it was so meaningful. The work was so meaningful. It changed everything about the way that I did my job back then when I was still employed by a state agency. And it changed everything about how I work with people as a coach, and even how I parented my children. Everything changed after that.
And how far back is that? Like, is definitely not 5 years ago. Like, you have been doing this for
It
quite a
was
while.
it was almost 10 years ago.
Because when you mentioned the blog, I was just like, oh
Mhm.
yeah, that's like ages ago in terms of how fast the internet has just like exploded. Oh, by the way,
Right.
I love this. I love the setting because the sun shines. It's like it's a lovely intervention there. Like it shines in the these. Oh, it's yeah. So, but and when you launch, like when you get into that stuff, what? Because I like this idea of you talking about like when you get some form, this is how you treat, like this is a paper and this is how you treat your customers. But when you come to think of it, like it's good to like how do I like to be treated, and what is a good experience for me. So like, I like that you have to go and check and think a little bit. So when you after the symposium or after the storytelling, how was it that you just what did you sit down with yourself or your family and say, I'm a storyteller now?
Well,
Whisk
I
your
got
hair.
paid for that. I got paid
Yeah,
for that, so I was officially a professional storyteller at that point.
yeah.
It took a long time for me to really find how to use that tool. I knew I was good at it. I knew I was good at helping other people share their stories, but I didn't make it a specific part of my career or my business right away. It took me a long time to, I guess, embed those skills into everything I was doing. And I think it's so important for people to know that we all know there's no such thing as an overnight success. There just
Oh no,
isn't.
no, no,
And
no,
we
no.
may see, oh my gosh, they went from nothing to this. Like, for instance, I always like to think of Sheryl Crow's trajectory. She was traveling all over, doing her music in bars to very small audiences for decades before she had her hit. All I want to do is
Mm-hmm.
have some fun, right? It took forever to get there.
Mm.
And for me, I started by realizing that I really enjoyed it and that I was pretty good at it. And I remember after I finished, I was so nervous before I got on that stage. I was so nervous. I could feel my stomach just like doing this. And I had had too much coffee. So as soon as I finished, I had to go use the restroom. I
Yeah.
was like, oh, I have to go. And I remember this moment of a lot of people coming up to me to talk to me afterward. And I was trying to be gracious, but I really had to use the restroom. So
Yeah.
I'm pulling myself away from these people, and I'm beelining through the building. And there are hundreds of people. There were over 300 people in the room, and it was my first significant keynote. And I remember how many people stopped to say, is your book for sale here at this conference? And I'm walking through this audience of people, the sea of people, going to the bathroom thinking, shit, now I have to write a book.
Yeah.
And that didn't even happen right away. It wasn't until I am highly influenced by a group of people on LinkedIn that I met back in 2015, 2016, even a little bit before that. One of those people is my dear friend Neil Hughes. And I started a summit called No Longer Virtual. And it's all about bringing people together that had only met online through LinkedIn, all of us having side hustles. None of us were our own business at that point. And we met face to face in 2017 for the first time. And I will never forget toward the end of that year, as I was planning for the next No Longer Virtual happening in 2018, I talked to Neil and he said, I'm going to be there for sure. And I said, you know what would be cool is if you hosted a panel session where we talked about building your brand across multimedia. Since you're already doing a podcast, this was 2017, podcasts weren't that common then. I said, you're already doing a podcast. Maybe we could talk about how to start a podcast as part of that panel. And he said, that's great. You know what I'll do is if you know somebody that wants to start a podcast, I'll help them start it. I'll give them this gift of my expertise to help them start it. And then we can use it as a case study to present to the group in February. I said, that's great. I know at least 2 people. So I asked actually 3 different people, and all of them said, no, I have too much to do. I have too much going on. I just can't, take on another project. And I thought, are you kidding me? This is like a $10,000 gift we're offering you.
Yeah.
And one of my friends finally said, Sarah, you're a storyteller, you're a musician. Why aren't you doing it?
Mm-hmm.
You're a communication professional. This is your world. Why aren't you doing it? And I thought,
how did you
now I
not
have to do a
realize?
podcast. So I would like to shift into the happiness at work aspect of what we're talking about so that our listeners.
I need to get, like, what was your background in the first place? Like, are you in communications, or like, where are you coming from?
Well,
like,
my degree as a musician, you're always communicating, right? What some people might not know about me is that I played the flute up until middle school. When I finished junior high,
you fell out a little
I
bit.
stopped playing the flute and started singing. And if that's not communication, I don't know what is, right? So I had that.
What I'm getting at, like, so you are a professional musician, like you have studied music and performing and stuff. So because, like, what I lacked in your bio was, like, you are not an engineer, or like so many people who go. Like, I was talking to Tony Martignetti, financial, like, we have all our background. So you are basically a performer. So like, but that is one way of telling a story.
Absolutely. Yes.
So, yeah. So now
And
you may come to the happiness.
okay, thank you. Well, and it is important when there are too many people out there saying that they are a coach.
Yeah.
Right? It's such a ubiquitous word now. And storyteller is also, people are putting it in their LinkedIn headlines. And it doesn't make sense to me that, but anyone can call themselves a storyteller. Anyone can call themselves a coach. And so I appreciate that you're looking into that background, like what makes you the right person for this job? And I so appreciate that. And what was interesting in terms of my background is that I spent about 20 years in the public sector working for government agencies. And in every role, I ended up being kind of a liaison, a trusted source for information, for guidance in terms of what to say when my boss says this, or how do I approach this person because he's really said some things that have insulted me, or how do I approach this person to give them feedback. For some reason, I was the resource for that through all of these years. So when I left my job, my last W-2 job, I was working for the city of Helena, which is the capital of Montana, and I was their first public affairs officer. They had never had anyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They had never had anyone in that role. And I was telling the stories of our community. I became the liaison between the community and the city manager's office. I became the liaison between the community and their elected officials. So my communication background became even richer by doing that. What I realized is that I couldn't fix what was wrong in our organization because I was in it. And there were so many issues in terms of communication between the leadership and the service level providers, the people that were out fixing the roads, the people that were out there picking up your garbage, the people who were out there collecting the trash from the parks and maintaining the parks and uh, setting up your water bill. Those people didn't seem to have a say in what was going on at the higher levels, even though they were doing all the work.
And maybe they didn't feel a part of the bigger picture.
Exactly.
Like, when
Exactly.
I remember, because I'm also with a background in the official, like from the councils and stuff. When I went, we had this huge party, and we were about around 1,400 people who worked for the city. And when you enter a stadium or a football hall or whatever where it was just like, wow, do I belong to this exceptional mass of people serving the community? It's just, and
It's
then,
kind of overwhelming.
yeah, and
Yeah.
sometimes it lacks because the person who is working with the trash or getting that, they are a significant piece of, well, the story of the city.
Absolutely. And they weren't being valued. I
Yeah.
remember one time in particular where we had a significant snowstorm and we were as prepared for it as we could be. Well, we are a small city. We have 200 roads or 200 miles of roads that need to be plowed, but we don't have a huge budget for it. And we budgeted to manage our average snowfall, and we got more than half of that in 2 or 3 days, as opposed to getting it over the course of the entire winter. So our people were out there as much as they could be out there. Our snowplow drivers were getting up and out there at 3 or 4 in the morning, trying to clear the roads. They're very narrow roads, and people were parked. So they're trying to avoid these cars. It's very slippery. And our community got really hostile online. I kept seeing these things on Facebook, really being hostile and angry toward the people that were out there at 3 in the morning trying to do their best to clear the roads for their community. And that's where, as a person who was doing um, the communication, where I started being that resource for our community to say, hey, you're insulting your neighbor. This person lives in our
Yeah.
community. They've been up since 3 in the morning. If you have a problem with how things are being done, you need to think about the budget. You need to think about how much more you're willing to pay to have more drivers, more snowplows. And remember that that's not all of it, right? There are so many aspects that go into that budget. You're talking about we have to raise rates for the stormwater, we have to raise rates for the solid waste division because the requirements for the landfills are getting more significant. So we have to pay more money to make sure that our landfills are safe. And being able to be that resource and sharing the story of how that happened really put me in a good position to leave and then come back as a contractor, as a consultant. And
Hmm.
my whole goal was I want people to like their jobs again. And the only way to do that is to improve the communication at work. And a big part of that is sharing your own personal stories so that people understand where you're coming from.
Yeah. I just want to mention that Jeff Ickler, I hope I am saying his name right. He's saying, so good to hear the backstory of how your stories came about. So it is sometimes fun to know how, the process is, or how it goes until you go somewhere and why you go. Because when you are talking and talking, because as a former employee of a community, people tend to think right up to their nose tip. They
Mm-hmm.
don't care about who they walk over or whatever. It's just like, I need to go to work. My kids need to go to school. And they don't care because people are really trying their best to do stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that brings me back to, like, then you are like, now we come to the podcast in 2018. So you are like, how long did you stay in the job in Montana or in Hell?
In
Montana. No.
Helena. Yes, Helena, Montana. That's the city and the state, Helena, Montana. I know you're in Iceland. Why would you know that? I'm
Yeah,
I'm so
well,
impressed with your English language skills, by the way.
I'm still thinking about the Bay Area, so that like I will check that people later on because
Yes.
you sometimes you people from America you're just like, yeah, we're in the Bay Area, and I'm just like, okay, America
I
is
don't know what that means.
America is huge. So where is the
Right.
like is that the Bay of Reykjavik or
So I started the podcast with Neil Hughes' help in December of 2017. We brought it forward to the group in 2018 in February when we met in Denver for the No Longer Virtual Summit. And I kept going because what I found was as I was interviewing people, I realized that people don't know how to share their most pivotal and meaningful stories. It was rare. After 50 episodes, I maybe had 3 people that could really share a moment in time that was meaningful from their lives. Otherwise, I was pulling the information from them, which was very cool. And I loved it. I found that I was good at it. And I really wanted to hold space for more people's stories. Because once you start to realize you don't have to have an epic story at work, if you come back to work after a weekend and you just mention, oh, I took a walk with my dog and I saw the most beautiful sunset, that is meaningful, right? You don't have to talk about walking your dog and a celebrity sighting or the I nearly died story. There's a time and a place for that kind of entertainment. But if you want to connect with people at work and bring happiness, you start with a story that's meaningful to you that will unlock the story of the person in front of you.
yeah.
So when I tell a story about sitting in the car when my boys were little, I loved driving with them in the back seat because they would tell me things that they wouldn't tell me if they saw my face. And I remember looking out the window and I'm driving along and one of my boys in the back just started singing one of the songs that I had been performing, and it was written in 1918. And here's my 6-year-old sitting in the back humming the song After You've Gone, written by Marion Harris. And I can tell that story and guaranteed you just thought about your twins when they were little and something they said because you were listening and you were quiet enough to hear them.
And for me and my wife, it was absolute necessity that they got hurt. And we also told them, like when they were growing up, like you give me 5 minutes, I will continue, like if we were chatting, and then I will just finish this, and then I got down to them and said, okay, now it's your time. Like now it's your turn. What is it that you want from me? And
Mhm.
because the same thing as when I told my wife, I told her 2 things that if we got a boy, then his name would be Aaron, like because there was a Icelandic Canadian boy who lived in a neighborhood and he moved away and I missed him. So that got stuck to me. And then I always wanted to say, and I did that like when I kissed them goodnight and I told them that I loved them. And then in the morning when they were off to kindergarten, I always kissed them and said, I love you because my father was an alcoholic. He was born in 1929 and my mother was born in 1925, so we know what kind of era they were grew up in,
Mhm.
where emotional attachment was just like something on a bread because they just like you could die
Right.
whenever. And I never heard this into my face, so but I always heard the rumor. Yeah, your father says that you are like, and I said, yeah, yeah, yeah. You know, so I found it because you never know what tomorrow brings. And
Mhm.
for me, it was very important that my kids, they would dwell on that I told them every single day, and even now when like that I love them because this feeling of parents leaving and the kids is left behind, and they don't know if they were loved
Mm.
because it was never said.
So
But
think about this for a second. I just shared less than a 1 minute story
yeah,
about my child sitting in the back seat, and it unlocked this entire series of memories for you.
yeah, because that is how
That's
I,
how story works.
yes, and that is how I feel because you resonate. It is something
Mhm.
like, because it's oddly enough that I started my podcast in 2018. I
Mm.
think it was in 2018, and I talked to several people. Then there was this one lady. All of a sudden, she talked to me about this experience she had when she was a student abroad, and she had a stillborn child. And
Mm.
afterwards, she said, "I was never going to tell you this, but somehow it just like, bleh." And I was just like, oh,
Because you were holding space for her. You were holding space
yes.
for her story.
And I was just like, well, I thank you because it gave our conversation a totally, like the dimension of the conversation just what, how, why. It took us to
Mhm.
another level of talking.
So
So
think about this in the workplace for a second.
yeah.
One of the things I noticed when I was working in public sector was that connecting with people on this level changed my relationship with them, of course, and it built trust. But not only that, it made me happier and more satisfied every day that I walked into the building. So, one of the things that I noticed is that there's always a complainer, there at least one.
Uh,
And when
yeah.
and when things are hard, like during this snowstorm, when the city was being hostily attacked on Facebook for our handling of this snowstorm, the morale in the building was harder. It was harder to walk
Hmm.
in because our community was really treating us badly. And one of the ways that I addressed this, because I was all about the communication improvement, is that when I would hear somebody complaining, I would start talking about things differently. I would say, "Oh my gosh, it was so fun taking my dog for a walk in this deep snow. Have you had a chance to get out and actually play? Because it's 18 inches deep. You should have seen him jump through the snow. He was like a deer leaping through the snow. It was amazing." And immediately it would change the dynamic in the room. And if somebody tried to veer off into complaint, I could acknowledge it and say, "Yep, I know it's hard. Ha- Tell me the highlight of your day. I get it. It's hard. Let's talk about what's going right." And then
And
and
all,
then you can address how to fix the things that are wrong. But to bring people to a place of satisfaction and happiness, you have to start with focusing on the good stuff. Otherwise, the bad stuff takes over and it just continues, for lack of a better analogy, like a snowball gaining speed down the hill and
uh,
getting bigger and bigger.
but sometimes also when you mention snowstorm, snow, okay, okay, this will sound weird coming from Iceland, but I hate snow. But what I have tried is to be intact with my inner child. I don't want to be a grown up. I don't want to be the grumpy me. We have plenty of that. Like try to remember what was it that gave you freedom. And I can see now that two of my favorite people in US and Canada, they are having a chat on LinkedIn. Rick Gasson, and like he has a comment there, and Linda Simpson.
Mhm.
So but it is something we have to remind ourselves, tap into the inner child. How was it growing up? Was everything as shitty as you want? Like, why is it that this happens to you? Why is it? Of course, there are times, and I totally feel you when you open the door and it's a snowstorm, and you just know, you sense, oh, this will be one of those days.
Mhm.
And then it's up to you to like throw a
Reframe.
snow. Yeah,
Reframing. Yeah.
throw a snowball in your boss's face, or
Hmm.
now, okay,
Well,
whatever.
I love that you brought that up because one of the things, and I want to get back to Rich's comment about people listening to 1% of the story and then interjecting their own. One of the things that I love about story is that we can reframe things. And when you think about the Viktor Frankl quote, between stimulant and response lies our freedom. That's, I'm paraphrasing to shorten it. But
Hmm. Hmm.
basically, you open the window and you see, another 6 inches of snow. And my first instinctive response might be, "Ugh, I'm going to have to go shovel this again." But if I give myself that moment to choose my response, yes, I'm going to go shovel snow again. That's not a good thing or a bad thing. It just is a thing. By going, oh, I have to shovel again, you're making it a bad thing. You're valuing it as a negative. So coming back to this, Rich's comment about, he said, I'm going to read this out loud. Most people know about 1% of the story before they interject an opinion. And it's great to hear how to educate people further through well told stories. I love that comment. And the thing is, it's so natural for us to have our own story rolling in our heads when we're hearing somebody else's story.
Mm.
I don't know anyone who doesn't do that. You're ready to share your own story. And it's not because you're not wanting to listen to the other person or you're not interested in the other person. It's because you have something that relates and you want to share it so that you can relate to this person. It's the goal 99% of the time is to contribute to the conversation. It's not to ignore or dismiss the other person's story. Knowing that, part of what I do in my trainings, in workplace trainings and my keynotes, is talk about how to listen despite that instinct, how to ensure that you are asking a follow-on question, and how to share a nice brief story that gives an insight into who you are, that feels right to you. I wouldn't ask you to share an extremely vulnerable story if that's not your style and it's going to make everyone seriously uncomfortable. But I can help you, I can guide you, especially using StrengthsFinder results or any of those assessments, to share a story that feels right to you to share at your level of vulnerability that will unlock the story of the person in front of you. And that's the key. I've learned through my podcast that I can share a story that's 1 to 2 minutes long and receive an incredible depth of a meaningful story from my guest. And if that's the goal, then that worked.
And Rich has another, like he's talking about the gratitude, like how that also can do wonders, because you can turn around the worst sour people to smile if they just listen to a story. Because I and it is not like Rich is, when I learned about his story, I was just like, I need to talk to this guy. And because you mentioned it before, that we were talking about everybody, like how it is to become a rock star or a world famous actor, or like like it takes time and not everybody gets there. But person, a person like Rich and his story, when I talked to him, my mouth was just down on the floor, because what he gave me in his story was just, oh my God, you are a hero. You are literally a rock star. Like, how it can elevate you and well, slap you in the face and say, hey, stop moaning. There are lots of people that has worse than you. Stories can snap you out of.
Can we come back to that for a second? That
Yeah.
there are people that have worse than you. I agree that sometimes that's the best way to make an adjustment internally. I also think it's important to recognize that our struggles are relative.
Oh, yes.
So when I share a story that I feel was a struggle to me, so for instance, I had the opportunity to perform the American and Canadian national anthems in front of a group of World War II veterans in 2014, a cappella, by
Oh,
myself, and scared the crap out of me. I was so nervous. I was so nervous. I could feel my kneecaps jogging up and down inside my legs. And I could tell the people could see them if they could see my knees.
yeah.
I was so nervous. And I'm a professional musician. I had been doing this. I had been singing with a band for a few years at that point. And there I was, nervous as heck. That was a moment that I will never forget because I was so scared. And I did it, and I nailed it, which
Yeah.
was such a relief. But the meaningful part of that to me was when I started singing the Canadian national anthem. So I finished the national anthem from the US. I took a deep breath. I waited for a second so people would know. And then I started the Canadian national anthem. And you know what I noticed? All the Canadians in the audience that had come down to Helena, Montana for this ceremony to give the Congressional Medal of Honor to this group of veterans, they started singing with me. And I noticed right away because I was in that place where I was really connected with the audience. And so I slowed down enough so that everyone could sing with me if they wanted to, anyone who knew the words. And at the end, I could see tears in people's eyes. And I sat down on the stage and they did the ceremony. And when it was all over and I was walking off the stage, a Canadian woman came up to me and she said, "Are you sure you're not Canadian?"
Oh, this is beautiful. But it means so much to people, and how, because they can tap into you and maybe tap into your fear, and they want to, when you people say that when you are and you try to teach your kids, like if they are going
Mm-hmm.
to make talk a speech, give a speech, then you say to them, find a friendly face,
Mm-hmm.
find the one who is nodding all the
Exactly,
time.
the one who's in agreement. So the thing
Yeah,
is, with that story, anyone can relate to that
yeah,
because that nervousness, that fear, everyone can relate to that, especially public speaking, or imagine standing on a stage and singing by yourself to
yeah,
300
yes.
people. It's terrifying. Everyone can relate to that level of nervousness. And so maybe somebody is getting ready to stand up in front of 6 people at their office and they're really nervous because that's not something they do regularly. They don't love public speaking. They're feeling like they're going to throw up any minute, right? They're feeling that vomit coming up their throat because they're so nervous. They hear my story, and maybe it's not singing the national anthem in front of 300 people, but they can relate to the emotion behind it, which makes it so relative, right? My fear in front of 300 people is the same as their fear in front of 6. There's nothing to separate that.
And it's basically, it all comes to train. Like you have to
Practice.
get practice, practice, practice. Because
Mhm.
I tell this story of my life and my wife's life, because I was an extrovert, but I'm still am, because I wouldn't be talking to you. And my wife was more of an introvert. And when we went to a party or something, she was still taking her coat off. When, like, I could tell what everybody, like how many kids they have, what work, and like, and she was just like, "How do you do this?" And I just like, well, I just know. And she went to the kitchen, and that was the best part. And then she was in a women's choir, and then she told me, "Yeah, I think I will. I'm going to be in the like one of the five who controls the choir." And I was just like, "Yeah, you do that. That's good. Yeah, I think I will be the chair." And then I was just, my wife, you have to stand in front of people and talking to them.
Yeah.
By the way, she is educated. She is a phys ed teacher. but she never wanted to be standing in front of. So I was just like, okay, who are you? And
She
like,
grew
what?
into it.
Yes, because
That's
the
awesome. I love
time,
that story. And I
the
love your
time was
pride that
right.
you
The
tell it.
time was right, and I remember when she was doing it for the first time, exactly like your story. I could see her like ears. They were just like like
I know.
everything. And you like nobody. She was very confident, but you could hear the trimmer, like the voice.
Vibrato. Hmm.
Yes. So, but everybody has to go through this stuff. Nobody is born like you have to be like practice make perfect, isn't it?
Exactly.
So I love this. So I don't think I would sing in front of people a cappella.
Well, I have to say that even when I was at work in regular jobs, I would get nervous in front of my colleagues sometimes. And I think one of the things that helped me was, first of all, I didn't know Kimberly Davis at the time, but Kimberly Davis, who's going to speak with you on Friday, part of her presentations is about making sure that what you're saying and your whether you're performing musically or speaking or writing or whatever, it can't be about you. It has to be about the audience. What do they need from me? What can I
Uh-huh.
give to them? How can I contribute to their happiness, to their satisfaction, to their success? Because then when you're standing up in front of everybody, if it's not about you, it immediately lowers your nerves. It immediately makes it so that, oh, this is my message and this is an important message and it's going to help people. It's not about me at all. It's about
Mm.
what I'm sharing here. And when I did that at work, it changed the dynamic. First of all, people know when you care about something. When people know that something is meaningful to you, if it's important to you, they are so much more likely to get on board and advocate and champion for it.
Mm.
So, talk about bringing happiness at work. When people know what matters to you and can contribute to that in some way, you are going to be happier at work, and so are they. Because if you want to build community, you have to let people contribute to it. You have to accept and receive with grace if you want to build community. And that's how we build community at work.
It's funny, like when you say this, because I was working in a youth clubs and stuff for many years, and I had to frequently tell the kids, "You are here for a reason. You don't know yet, but maybe you will save a person's life in the future. Maybe you will do stuff that does something to revolutionize blah 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 blah."
Hmm.
So
Right.
it doesn't have to be that we all have to be rock stars or legends or blah, or like it just do what becomes you, like what makes you feel good. And when the time be, no, like my wife, when she like, yeah, and she said it so casually, like, yeah, and I think I will be chair. And I was just like, who are you? Like, it was so like, she hit me in my face. I was just like, are you like, are you really like, are you sure? But that was me, like, oh, cuddly, cuddly. Like, are you sure you want to do
But
it?
right, because you want to protect her from
Yeah. But
hurting
so
herself or being embarrassed, or you want to protect her from stuff, and that's totally normal.
and that is why, like your podcast or many podcasts, when you hear stories that resonates, you just, yeah, and you like, yeah. When the athletes are on the football field in US, you but just like, yeah, and they get excited, and everybody gets excited. So a good story can really do wonders.
Mm-hmm.
And never underestimate that your story is not the greatest story ever.
It doesn't need to be.
No, but yeah, but it can be but either way, it's interesting, and everybody matters, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But how do you see, but yet we are fighting with lack of, should we call it humanity, or people are starting to forget. So how, because communication, we are so dwelling on our phones and everything. So can you see a tendency to, like, have we stopped telling stories, or because you said that you tell one story for a minute and then everything comes out, or how has now you have been doing this for what, 8 years, 6 years, the podcast?
Mm-hmm.
Is it easier? Is it difficult? Or how do you find the times now?
I haven't seen a significant change in how
Okay,
people
yeah.
behave on my podcast. I haven't seen that people are better at it. I haven't seen that people are worse at it. And I have interviewed a variety of people from all over the world in different age groups and different experiences. What I find is that people are hungry. They're hungry for this. They're hungry for connection. So, especially at work where you're spending the majority of your day,
Uh-huh.
people are hungry for connection. And sharing the right story at the right moment can change the trajectory of your day, of your week, of your life by connecting more authentically with people at work. And this, again, I don't want to encourage people to overshare. I don't want to hear about how you're on the Zoom meeting or you're standing in the break room and you're sharing about I don't know, your mother's death from when you were 4 and start bawling your eyes out, and people all around are going, "Whoa, we're at work. This is not the
Yeah,
time or
yeah,
place."
yeah.
I'm not, although there are times where that's just going to happen and we have to allow for that emotion at work. I'm encouraging people to share a story of something satisfying. I'm going to give before we finish, I would love to give our audience and listeners um, a strategy to try. Just try this out at work. When you have an opportunity to talk to somebody, whether it's on Zoom or online or in person, ask them, instead of "How are you?" ask them a question that generates a deeper conversation. That might be, "What was the highlight of your weekend?" Or, "I know you have a dog. Tell me about the last time he got into trouble."
Yeah.
Or, I know your kids are in school. Um, is there anything, how do your kids like their teacher?" Ask a specific question that can generate a slightly deeper conversation. This might not be an hour conversation. Most of us don't have time to sit down and
Oh,
chat for
yeah,
an
yeah,
hour at
yeah.
work. I mean, I do because I host a podcast and I'm lucky that way. But if you're at work and you just say, "How are you?" you're going to get the "I'm fine" or "could be better." You're going to get a short answer. So I'm challenging you at work. If you want happiness at work, if you want more happiness at work, and you want to generate happiness at work for your colleagues, ask them a question like, "Tell me the highlight of your day yesterday." And have one ready to share. So if I say, "Jeff, tell me the highlight of your day yesterday," and he's hesitating because he's thinking about all the things that went wrong, I might say, "Yesterday I woke up, I wasn't in a great mood. I had a weird dream, didn't sleep well. But then I noticed my dog. When I got up, I stepped out of bed, and the dog's tail was immediately wagging and it was thumping against the wall. It was the sweetest thing. He was so happy to see me. And I climbed onto his little bed and snuggled him and just scratched him on his ears for like 2 minutes, made my whole morning better." That was the highlight of my day yesterday because it was a hard day, but that was the highlight. And you know what it did? It unlocked his story. "Oh, I had a great cup of coffee. it was one of those that I took a sip and I went, wow, this is really good coffee.
Um,
So you have to have your
this,
own story ready.
yeah, because we tend to forget. We are always focusing on the negative. So, and this is why this is my maybe thing that I want people to. Nothing is all that bad because you live and breathe. Yet another day, you open your eyes, you hear the birds sing. Take notice. Just walk around and like I was noticing everything is turning red now in the nature, like because autumn is coming or is winter is coming or whatever you want to say. So it's quite right. It is just noticed around you because well, and then the mantra is don't watch news because that is total waste of time because that is one heck of a negativity from the get-go. So
Mhm.
just stay on the kids, talk to them.
Mhm.
So, and because you mentioned, like we have been talking now, time flies when you're having fun, isn't it?
Mhm.
It's just like because I think, like you said, we were talking before, we could probably speak for a whole day and we would not notice it. So, is there anything like because the International Week of Happiness at Work, like it's something that two ladies in Holland they just came up with because they want to celebrate the good stuff, the good work culture. Stop focusing on the
Mhm.
negative stuff. Like, how do you see? How can we help each other? How can we elevate? Like, what can we do more?
Well, the first thing is do my challenge.
Yes.
Try asking a question that's not, how are you? Make sure that when you are approaching somebody, especially in person or at the beginning of a meeting, even if it's Zoom, oh, hi, Andrew Moss. Um, at the beginning, start with something positive, start with something light, and not, how are you? Because you're not going to get a real answer. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, it is up to everyone in the organization. You cannot wait for leadership to bring happiness to work. I've read a lot about how these organizations that have like all these snacks and games and toys at work, they really haven't made a significant impact in people's satisfaction and happiness at work. And that's because it's not things that make you happy at work. It's the people, it's your team, it's the people that you have to work with. So it's up to each of us, not up to the leaders, to bring that happiness ourselves. If we notice that we are complaining all the time, then something's got to change. People don't like to be around people who complain all the time. There are days where I wake up and I step out of my bed and the dog has puked on the floor. Not a great way to start the day. And I might go to work and say, oh, you would not believe the start of my day. There are days that are like that. But if you find yourself consistently being around people who complain or finding your person where you spend the majority of your time when you're talking complaining about things that are going on at work, move away from that person. The next thing I would recommend is to acknowledge people for what they bring. So if you have somebody in your organization that is always positive and you get a little questionable about it, you're like, oh, it's fake. They can't possibly be that positive all the time. Maybe they really are. Maybe they have positivity in their top talents, and that means that they just see how things are going to work out. They just know, they've seen the evidence that one way or another things work out. And so they approach things with that optimism. Appreciate that, value that. Take one of those little tiny post it sticky notes and write, thank you for the smile this morning. It made my day, and stick it on their monitor. If you know there's a colleague down the hallway that loves collecting interesting teas, and you go to a store and you see something that an unusual tea that you haven't experienced before, pick it up. Is it $3? Pick it up and bring it to your colleague and say, I know you collect tea and that this is your thing. Do small things for people in your office and share highlights to begin to unlock the highlights of the stories of the people around you. That would be my closing remarks.
It's a mic drop. Like it's just like craziness. And as Aaron, I think his name is Aaron, amazing power of the conversation. And it is just, Sarah, I am so happy that I got you to do this with me. And unbelievably so, we are just, this was destined. This is unbelievable. But now, how can people get in contact with you? LinkedIn, Facebook, like you're all over.
Yes. Well, first, I'd love to thank Linda for that lovely comment. Thank you for that. And thank you for everybody who attended and participated. Jeff and Rich and Andrew, so good to see everybody. Arun, thank you. You please connect with me on LinkedIn. Send me a story, a two-sentence story in your connection request. Let me know you a little bit when you submit your request to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. I have a job interview storytelling course available on Udemy. So if you're looking for a job and you really want to step up your preparation, that course is very inexpensive and it's designed to be inexpensive so people who are underemployed or unemployed can take it and find the value in it. But please connect with me on LinkedIn and let's share some stories.
Brilliant. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, Sarah. This was day 2, session 4. Brilliant. Thank you.